Look, I need to get something straight right from the start. Sometimes you have to choose happiness over staying trapped, and that's exactly what I did. I'm Emma. I'm 36, and 8 months ago, I finally had the courage to leave a marriage that was slowly killing my soul. Everyone wants to act like I destroyed some perfect family, but they don't understand what it's like being married to someone who thinks showing up is the same as showing love. Logan was one of those men who believed his IT job and mortgage payments made him husband of the year. Sure, he'd sit at his computer all day fixing other people's problems, but when did he ever fix ours? When did he ever look at me like I was more than just the woman who did his laundry and kept his house clean? The man had zero passion, zero drive, zero anything that made my heart race. Then Brent moved back to town. My first real love, the one who actually knew how to make a woman feel desired. And suddenly I remembered what it felt like to have someone's eyes light up when I walked into a room, to have conversations that lasted hours, to feel beautiful and want it again. Anyway, make sure to hit that like button if you're enjoying this, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. Yeah, we started talking while I was still married. So what Logan had emotionally abandoned me years before I ever met Brent for coffee. He'd come home, grunt his way through dinner zone out in front of his computer or TV, and act like I was invisible. I was withering away in that house, becoming this shadow of myself. The connection with Brent was instant and electric. He remembered everything about me, my dreams, my fears, the way I used to laugh before life beat it out of me. He'd come by during the day when Logan was at work, and we'd just talk. Really talk. About life, about what we wanted, about how we'd both settled for less than we deserved. Madison would sometimes come home early from school and find us in the backyard or living room. I'd just tell her Brent was an old friend catching up. She's always been too observant for her own good, watching everything with those calculating eyes of hers, but she never said anything to Logan. Smart kid. The physical side developed naturally. A touch that lingered sitting closer on the couch, and eventually, you can fill in the blanks. I felt conflicted at first, but then I'd watch Logan mindlessly scrolling his phone while I tried to tell him about my day, and any guilt just evaporated. How can you betray someone who doesn't even see you? I knew I had to make a choice. Stay married to a man who treated me like a roommate, or choose someone who actually wanted me. The decision became crystal clear one evening when I tried to have a serious conversation with Logan about our relationship, and he literally paused his video game to give me these dismissive nods before going back to his screen. That night I told him I wanted a divorce. His reaction was so typical. Just this blank stare and a quiet, "Is there someone else?" When I told him yes, he didn't even get angry. No fight, no passion. No attempt to win me back. Just this pathetic acceptance that proved everything I'd been thinking about him. A real man would have fought for his marriage. The divorce process was straightforward enough. We agreed on alternating weeks with Madison. I got my car and a decent chunk of our savings. He kept his precious house. I was actually generous, and we could have pushed for more, but I just wanted to start fresh with Brent. Madison took the news quietly. Too quietly, if I'm being honest. She didn't cry or ask questions, just nodded and went to her room. I figured she needed time to process, and kids adapt faster than adults anyway. She'd see how much happier I was with Brent and eventually understand that sometimes you have to choose your own happiness. Brent and I found a beautiful 3-bedroom place, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could actually breathe. We talked about marriage once my divorce was final. He'd even started looking at rings, making plans for our future. Everything was falling perfectly into place. The custody exchanges started awkward but manageable. Logan would barely acknowledge me when dropping Madison off or picking her up, which was fine. I had nothing to say to him anyway. Madison seemed subdued those first few weeks, but I assumed she just needed time to adjust to the new routine. Brent tried his best with her. He'd ask about school offer to help with homework, try to include her in our conversations. She was polite but distant, which I expected. It would take time for her to warm up to him, but eventually she'd see what a good man he was compared to her father. Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs. Madison was quieter than usual, spent most of her time at our place holed up in her room, and had this way of watching Brent and me interact that made me uncomfortable, but I was so caught up in finally being happy that I missed what was really brewing in her head. Then, one Friday, everything started falling apart. It was supposed to be my week with Madison, but she walked through the front door way earlier than expected. Brent was sitting in the driveway with the engine running, waiting to take us out to dinner. "Hey, sweetie, everything okay? Thought you were staying the week with me?" Madison dropped her backpack and looked at me with these exhausted, almost disgusted eyes. "I'm not staying here anymore." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean? Did something happen?" "Nothing happened. I just don't want to be here." Before I could respond, I heard a car door slam. Logan was walking up to the front door, and I knew immediately that Madison had called him to pick her up. The betrayal hit me like a slap. We stepped outside to talk while Madison stayed inside. I tried to play it casual, telling Logan that she was just being dramatic and testing boundaries like teenagers do, that she'd get over it and we'd work through this rough patch. But Logan looked through the window at Madison sitting on our couch, and something in his expression shifted. "I'm not going to force her into a car if she doesn't want to be here, Emma. We need to handle this legally." That's when I lost it. Started yelling about how he was undermining me, turning our daughter against me, using her as a weapon in our divorce. But Logan just stood there with that infuriating calm of his and said, "We'd let the lawyers sort it out." He left with Madison, and I was left standing in my driveway, watching my carefully constructed new life start to crumble. Brent tried to comfort me, saying Madison was just acting out and would come around, but I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes too. The temporary custody hearing got scheduled within weeks. My lawyer warned me that when teenagers flat out refuse to go to one parent's house, courts take it seriously. But I was confident. Madison was just confused, probably missing the stability of her old life. Once I had a chance to explain things properly, she'd understand. In the weeks leading up to the hearing, Madison started opening up to Logan about what she'd witnessed at my house. Not that he told me directly, I had to piece it together from Madison's increasingly hostile attitude during our court-mandated phone calls. She'd drop these little bombs into our conversations. "I saw you and Brent kissing last year when Dad was at work. You told me not to tell Dad about Brent coming over. You made me lie." Each accusation felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I tried to explain that adult relationships are complicated, that sometimes people grow apart, that I never meant for her to get caught in the middle, but she'd just get this cold look in her eyes and change the subject. My ex-husband started going into overdrive mode, documenting every interaction, forwarding my increasingly frantic texts to his lawyer. When I tried to call Madison directly, Logan would answer and calmly tell me to communicate through the attorneys. The control he was exerting was maddening. Then Brent decided to get involved. He sent Logan this long message about being a positive male role model for Madison and how Logan needed to man up and let go. I wanted to die when Logan forwarded that screenshot to my lawyer. It made us look unstable and boundary crossing. The night before the hearing, I drove to Logan's house unannounced. I needed to talk to Madison alone to explain my side before she told the judge God knows what version of events. Logan answered the door but wouldn't let me inside. "She's doing homework. What do you need?" "I need to see my daughter, alone." "And that's not happening. She's made it clear she doesn't want to be at your place right now. Let the judge handle it tomorrow." I tried to push past him, but he blocked me. That's when Madison appeared behind him, looking older than her 14 years. Mom, no one turned me against you. I just don't want to be around you right now." "Baby, please. I'm your mother. I love you." "You cheated on Dad for months. You made me keep it secret. That's messed up." "It's complicated. Adults make mistakes when you're older." "I'm old enough to understand that you lied and made me lie too. I don't want to be part of that anymore." I tried one more time to get into the house to have a real conversation with her, but Logan threatened to call the police. I left feeling like everything I'd worked for was slipping through my fingers. The hearing was brutal. The judge was this stern woman in her 50s who didn't seem impressed by my tears or explanations. She started by talking to Madison privately for almost an hour while I sat in the hallway trying not to have a panic attack. When Madison came out, she looked drained but determined. The judge's expression gave nothing away. Back in the courtroom, the questions started simple enough. my work schedule living situation, relationship with Madison. I explained that I worked in customer service, had flexible hours, and that Brent and I provided a stable, loving home with plenty of room for Madison. Then the judge asked about my relationship timeline. How long have you been with your current partner? About a year and a half. And when did you separate from your husband? 8 months ago. So this relationship began while you were still married. The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. I tried to explain that Logan and I were having problems, that our marriage was essentially over anyway, but the judge's expression didn't change. Then she brought up her conversation with Madison, and my world started collapsing in real time. The child reported witnessing physical affection between her mother and the mother's current partner prior to the marital separation. She stated that she was explicitly instructed not to share this information with her father, and was made to feel responsible for keeping this secret. I went numb. Everything I'd tried to protect, every careful lie I'd constructed, was being laid bare in this sterile courtroom. The judge continued. She also reported feeling like an outsider in her mother's home because the mother's partner is always present, and she feels her mother prioritizes this relationship over spending time with her. She mentioned an incident where she wanted to return to her father's home early, and the mother's partner called her selfish. I wanted to scream that it wasn't that simple, that I deserved happiness too, that I'd been suffocating in my marriage. But looking at Logan sitting calmly at his table while my lawyer frantically scribbled notes, I knew I was losing. The judge's ruling was swift and devastating. Primary physical custody to Logan. Supervised visitation for me every other weekend. Child support of $420 per month based on our income difference. I shot up from my chair. Your Honor, this isn't fair. I'm her mother. He's been manipulating her, coaching her. Ma'am, sit down. I interviewed your daughter extensively. She was not coached. She was credible, detailed, and consistent. Your daughter is hurt by your choices and uncomfortable in your environment. If you want to repair that relationship, that's your responsibility. As we left the courthouse, I was crying, and Brent was furious. He started approaching Logan in the hallway, but Logan's lawyer immediately stepped between them, warning Brent not to come near his client or the minor child. In the car afterward, I felt like my entire world had imploded. Everything I'd sacrificed, every risk I'd taken for happiness had backfired spectacularly. Madison wouldn't even look at me as Logan drove away with her. The first supervised visit was awkward and heartbreaking. Madison sat across from me in that sterile visitation room, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. I tried to apologize, to explain that I never meant to hurt her, but she just stared at me with these cold, judgmental eyes. You kept asking me to lie to Dad. That's not okay. I was trying to protect everyone. Adult relationships are complicated. You were protecting yourself, not me, not Dad. 2 hours felt like an eternity. When it was over, Madison hugged me briefly, but it felt obligatory, like she was going through the motions. The child support payment started automatically deducting from my paycheck. $420 every month going to Logan, who probably just put it in some college fund while I struggled to make ends meet on my reduced income. Brent started getting distant. The stress of the custody battle, the financial strain, the constant drama, it was wearing on both of us. He'd make comments about how he didn't sign up for all this legal mess, how maybe we should have waited until my divorce was final before getting serious. The man who'd once called me the love of his life was now questioning whether we moved too fast, whether the timing was right, whether Madison would ever accept him. All those promises about marriage and our future together started feeling hollow. 3 months after the hearing, Brent moved out. Said he needed space, to think that the situation with Madison was too complicated, that maybe we should take a break until things settled down. I knew it was over when he started packing his clothes while avoiding eye contact. I was alone in that 3-bedroom house I could barely afford, seeing my daughter 4 days a month under supervision, watching my ex-husband post pictures on social media of him and Madison at her school events, her debate team competitions, her normal life that I was no longer part of. Logan looked good in those photos, happier, more confident. Madison was smiling in ways I hadn't seen in months. They'd built this new routine without me, this father-daughter bond that seemed stronger than ever. Meanwhile, my supervised visits were stilted and uncomfortable. Madison would answer my questions politely, but never volunteered information. She'd tell me about school, her friends, her activities, but it all felt like she was talking to a distant relative rather than her mother. When I asked about possibly spending more time together, maybe having her stay overnight once the supervision period ended, she'd just shrug and say she was comfortable with the current arrangement. 6 months after losing custody, I ran into Logan at the grocery store. He was with Madison, and they were laughing about something, looking relaxed and happy in a way that made my chest ache. When Madison saw me, her smile faded, and she moved closer to her father. "Hi, Emma," Logan said politely. "Madison, say hi to your mom." "Hi, Mom," flat emotionless. "How are you, sweetie? I miss you." "I'm fine. We're kind of in a hurry." They left me standing in the cereal aisle, feeling like a stranger to my own child. That night I called my lawyer to ask about appealing the custody decision, but she told me bluntly that unless there were significant changes in my circumstances, or Logan's, no judge would reverse a decision where the child had clearly stated her preferences. I'd lost everything. My marriage, my daughter, my relationship with Brent, my financial stability, my reputation in our small community. Everyone knew what had happened. The affair, the custody battle, Madison choosing her father. I became the cautionary tale that other wives whispered about at school pickup and grocery stores. The truth is, I still don't think I'm the villain in this story. Yeah, I had an affair. Yeah, I made some mistakes. But I was dying in that marriage, and Logan was too weak and passive to fight for what we had. If he'd been a stronger man, if he'd shown me the attention and passion I needed, none of this would have happened. But looking at my empty house, my supervised visitation schedule, my daughter who barely tolerates spending time with me, I have to admit that maybe, just maybe, I chose the wrong way to find happiness. And now I'm living with consequences that feel way harsher than what I actually did to deserve them. The worst part is watching Logan thrive while I'm struggling to rebuild my life from scratch. He got the house, the daughter, the sympathy, and apparently the strength he never showed during our marriage. Meanwhile, I'm the one everyone blames for breaking up a family, even though that family was already broken long before Brent came back to town. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd tried harder to fix things with Logan first, or if I'd waited until after the divorce to start seeing Brent. But then I remember how invisible I felt in that marriage, how lonely and unappreciated, and I know I had to choose myself. I just wish choosing myself hadn't cost me my daughter.